Sigmund Freud was a physician and neurologist who lived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Freud was the founder of psychoanalysis. Keep in mind that psychoanalysis is different from psychiatry. It is not considered a branch of medical science. According to medical science standards, Freud's theories and psychoanalytic techniques are neither provable nor falsifiable. For this reason, today we examine Freud's theories of the unconscious, not as medical science, but as a philosophical perspective. The theory of the unconscious is significant because psychoanalysis is used not only in treating mental disorders, but also in helping individuals understand their own minds and psyche better. Generally speaking, the human mind is divided into two parts, the conscious and the unconscious. A person is relatively aware of the conscious part of their mind, which is clear and accessible to them. However, the unconscious forms the majority of the human mind. Imagine an iceberg floating in the ocean. If the visible tip of the iceberg represents the conscious mind, the massive body submerged beneath the water represents the unconscious. Most of our psychological problems, such as addiction, violence, and depression, have their roots in the unconscious. Yet the unconscious is hidden from us and remains inaccessible. A psychoanalyst strives to access a patient's unconscious with their cooperation and uncover the secrets of that mysterious realm, a task that is challenging and time-consuming. Let me tell you a story. One day, a man sees his friend searching for something in the garden. He asks, "Where did you lose it?" The friend replies, "Inside the house." The man asks, "Then why are you looking outside?" The friend answers, "Because it's dark inside and I can't see anything." You see, the unconscious is a dark space, yet the solutions to many of our problems and the answers to many of our questions are hidden there and can only be found there. The unconscious is a vast topic, but to keep things simple, today I want to focus on the concept of repression. To explain the mechanism of repression, Freud proposed that the human psyche consists of the id, the ego, and the superego. The id represents primal instincts and desires. Freud primarily focused on sexual desires. The id is a driving force in the unconscious that manifests in the conscious mind as the ego. The behavior, speech, and emotions of a person influenced by the id form the ego. But do we always act solely under the influence of the id? Fortunately, no. Otherwise, every time we felt a sexual urge toward a stranger, we would immediately attack them to satisfy our needs. Or if an obnoxious driver cut us off in traffic and then rudely insulted us, our rage and aggression would compel us to get out of the car and fight them, perhaps even to the point of killing them or getting beaten up ourselves. Luckily, I am a calm and considerate person, and I don't behave that way. Why? Because besides the id and the ego, the superego also exists within the human psyche. The superego, operating at an unconscious level, constantly judges the desires of the id. If it deems them dangerous, inappropriate, or immoral, it represses them, locking them away deep in the unconscious. Keep in mind that no desire, urge, or experience is ever truly erased from the human mind. Whatever a person forgets at a conscious level still exists somewhere in their unconscious. So as we said, the id and the superego are constantly in conflict, trying to keep the ego balanced. Now consider a person who commits sexual assault. Their psyche is unbalanced. Why? Because their superego is not functioning properly and fails to repress the inappropriate sexual urges of the id. The same applies to someone who cannot control their anger. Either their superego is weak or the impulses driven by their id are excessively powerful. In such cases, even if the superego succeeds in repressing the id's urges, it must exert such a tremendous effort that the person becomes mentally exhausted and drained. In some cases, the opposite happens. The superego becomes excessively dominant. Have you ever met people who constantly strive to please everyone, making sure their words, gestures, and behavior are flawless in every situation? They also have an id, but their superego represses its desires so intensely that everything remains under strict control. This too is a form of psychological imbalance. Excessive suppression of the id can sometimes have very negative consequences. If the id ever manages to break free from the control of the superego and reach the level of the ego, It may take revenge for all the suppression it has endured. For example, in Christianity, some priests are not allowed to marry and must completely suppress their sexual desires for their entire lives. The extreme repression of these desires in the church has, in some cases, resulted in sexual abuse of children, tragically occurring in a sacred environment. Let me share an example from Freud's psychoanalysis. A woman suffered from hysteria, a psychological disorder that can result from extreme repression. Through therapy sessions, Freud discovered that she had once felt sexual attraction toward her brother-in-law. Some years earlier, when her sister had fallen ill, a thought had surfaced from her mind. If her sister died, she could freely be with her brother-in-law. This thought was so morally unacceptable to her that her superego acted immediately, repressing it deep into her unconscious. She completely forgot this memory, and the desire and thought that had once crossed her mind were erased from her conscious awareness. During psychoanalysis through hypnosis, the patient recalled this forgotten memory. The therapist helped her reconstruct that moment in her mind, but this time, she was encouraged to express love for her sister, to say how much she missed her, how deeply saddened she was by her illness, and that she would give up everything to see her sister live. After this session, the woman was cured of her hysteria. Now, an important point to discuss is that when the superego represses the desires of the AD, they do not simply remain idle in the unconscious. Instead, they constantly try to break free and return to conscious awareness. Often, they change form to deceive the superego and escape from the unconscious prison. Let's look at some examples of how this process occurs. 1. Freudian slips of the tongue. One day, a man was visiting someone's home, and he was captivated by the beauty of the hostess, who was wearing a low-cut dress. He was shy and did not want her to notice his attraction, so when he tried to compliment the home's decor, he accidentally said, "What a beautiful décor," instead of "what a beautiful décor," décor being short for décolleté. Here, the repressed desire in his id, which was meant to be suppressed, revealed itself through a slip of the tongue. 2. Freudian slips of action. For example, a person who usually wakes up early might oversleep on the morning of an important job interview and miss it. Freud argued that nothing humans do is purely accidental. This person may have subconsciously disliked the job, but because they needed the income, they suppressed that dislike. However, their unconscious mind expressed this feeling through an action, oversleeping, allowing their true feelings to manifest. 3. Dreams and their hidden meanings. Freud believed that the primary function of dreams is to fulfill repressed and forbidden desires. Desires that cannot be realized in waking life find expression in dreams. However, decoding the unconscious through dreams is not easy. It requires the help of both the patient and the psychoanalyst. While the superego is weaker during sleep, it is still active, so repressed desires disguise themselves. What we remember from dreams is just their manifest content, while their latent content, the true meaning, must be uncovered with analysis. For example, suppose someone dreams that their female cousin gives them 2 balloons as a gift. After several therapy sessions, the analyst realizes that this person has a hidden sexual attraction to their cousin, which is considered taboo in their society. Their superego has repressed this desire deep into the unconscious. However, it resurfaces in the form of a dream, disguised as balloons. The therapist might suggest that the patient had seen balloons in a park that day, in a picture, or even in a magazine. Additionally, the 2 balloons could symbolize the woman's breasts. It is important to note that there is no universal rule for dream interpretation. The meaning of a particular object in a dream varies from person to person. The psychoanalyst must deeply understand the patient's psyche to accurately interpret their dreams. In the end, it must be said that some of Freud's theories shocked the bourgeois society of Vienna at the time. He addressed issues that were considered extremely taboo and unacceptable to most people, and these theories led him to lose many of his followers. For example, he claimed that children also have sexual desires. Of course, by sexual desire, he did not mean genital desire. Freud knew better than anyone that genital desire emerges in humans during puberty. What he meant by sexual desire was an intense emotional need and a desire for touch, both to be touched and to touch others. He went even further and argued that a newborn's first desire is directed toward their mother, as she is their primary connection to the world. As the infant begins to explore their surroundings, especially their father, and as the superego starts to form, this desire is strongly repressed and buried deep in the unconscious. This is why people have no memory or recollection of these desires. Even today, such theories can shock people, and discussing these topics may still seem inappropriate to some, let alone to those who lived in the early 20th century, when people's mindsets were more closed and traditional than they are today. In any case, Freud is a thinker to whom no one remains indifferent. Some consider him a genius worthy of admiration, while others despise him and his ideas,